Is it possible that the single greatest technical and emotional magic trick in the history of recorded sound was born not from divine inspiration, but from a neurotic inability to make a decision and a terrified refusal to face reality? To truly approach the monolith that is Strawberry Fields Forever, you have to stop listening to it as a pop song. You must strip away the decades of radio play, the cultural calcification, and the image of four lovable mop-tops shaking their heads on the Ed Sullivan Show. By the freezing winter of late 1966, that band was dead. The four men who walked into EMI Studios at Abbey Road were tired, cynical, chemically altered, and possessed by a terrifying artistic arrogance that demanded the impossible from machines that were never designed to deliver it. You want to understand why this track is a masterpiece? It is not because it is pretty. It is a masterpiece because it is a lie. It is a sonic hallucination stitched together from two completely different realities, forced to coexist by the sheer will of genius and the brute force of a razor blade. It represents the precise moment where the recording studio ceased to be a room, where a performance was documented, and became an instrument in itself, as vital, volatile, and expressive as the guitar or the piano. We must first understand the psychological terrain. John Lennon did not bring a song to the studio. He brought a neurosis. He brought a fragment of a memory, a childhood refuge in the overgrown Gothic grounds of a Salvation Army children's home in Liverpool, named Strawberry Field. But do not be fooled by the geography. This song is not about a place. It is not a nostalgic postcard. It is a terrifying confession of an internal state of disjointed reality. It is about the sensation of knowing, with absolute certainty, that you are insane, or perhaps that you are the only sane person in a world of sleepwalkers. The brilliance lies in how the music does not merely accompany that feeling. It physically replicates the sensation of a dissolving ego through the manipulation of electricity and air pressure. To understand the sonic architecture, we must begin with the machine that defines the song's opening breath, the Mellotron Mech 2. In the modern era, where digital synthesizers can replicate a symphony orchestra with the push of a button, it is difficult to grasp the sheer mechanical audacity of the Mellotron. In 1967, this was not a synthesizer. It was a beast of springs, motors, and magnetic tape. When Paul McCartney pressed a key on that keyboard, he was not triggering a microchip. He was engaging a physical mechanism that pulled a strip of magnetic tape across a playback head. That flute sound you hear in the intro? That is not a synthetic approximation. That is a recording of a real flautist, frozen on tape, degraded by the machine's primitive mechanics, and resurrected by McCartney's fingers. The sound is ghostly, warbly, and detached because it is detached. The tapes inside the Mellotron had a finite length of about 8 seconds. If you held the note too long, the tape would run out, and a spring would snap it back to the beginning. This limitation forced a specific style of playing: staccato, careful, fearful. The tuning was never perfect. The motor speed fluctuated, causing the pitch to waver slightly, creating a natural chorusing effect that no digital pedal has ever perfectly emulated. This intro sets the listener in a space that is neither acoustic nor electronic. It is the uncanny valley of sound. It tells your brain immediately, you are not in a room with a band anymore. You are inside someone's head. It functions as a portal. The specific timbre of those flutes, breathy, slightly dull, lacking the bright high-end frequencies of a live instrument, establishes a mood of dusty, attic-bound memory. It is the sound of looking at a photograph that is curling at the edges. Now we must look at the harmonic structure, for this is where Lennon weaponizes music theory against the listener. If you are a guitar player, you know the profound frustration of trying to pin this song down. The ambiguity is deliberate. Lennon is utilizing non-functional harmony to destroy your sense of a tonal center. The verse starts with a statement, but immediately descends chromatically. This is the passus duriusculus, the hard step, a musical device used since the Baroque period to signify grief, pain, or falling. But Lennon doesn't resolve it cleanly. He throws in chords that shouldn't work but do because of the voice leading. When he sings, "No one I think is in my tree," the chord progression leaves the listener suspended. The harmony refuses to land. It floats. It mimics the lyrical hesitation. I mean, it must be high or low. He is musically stuttering. Most songwriters want to project confidence. Lennon used music theory, intuitively, not academically, which makes it more potent, to project confusion. The use of the flat 7 chord against the major tonic creates a mixolydian flavor that feels like a blues. But the melody is strictly horizontal, almost chanting. It is a drone dressed up as a pop song. The harmonic rhythm, the speed at which the chords change, is erratic. It speeds up and slows down, mirroring the racing thoughts of a mind under the influence of LSD. This is not drug music for the sake of being trippy. It is a clinical replication of the psychedelic experience, where linear time collapses and logic becomes fluid. But the true insanity, the thing that separates the men from the boys in the annals of music history, is the rhythm section. We need to talk about Ringo Starr. For decades, fools have dismissed him as a lucky amateur. Strawberry Fields Forever is his vindication and his monument. Listen to the drums. They do not just keep time, they narrate the chaos. The kit was subjected to Geoff Emerick's radical engineering techniques, close miking the drums, which was technically forbidden by EMI rules at the time, and dampening the heads heavily, likely with tea towels or by removing the bottom heads to kill the resonance. It sounds like he is hitting wet cardboard or heavy logs. It is a dead thudding sound that occupies a specific narrow frequency range, leaving room for the orchestral madness on top. But it is what he plays that matters. The fills are backward. I do not mean the tape is reversed, though the cymbals are later. I mean his phrasing goes against the grain of standard 4/4 rock drumming. He creates a stumbling, rolling feel, a polyrhythmic texture that feels like falling down the stairs in slow motion. He locks in with the cellos and brass, not just the bass guitar. This is crucial. Ringo isn't playing with the band, he's playing with the orchestra. His fill leading into the second verse is a sprawling, tom-heavy tumble that feels like the ground giving way beneath your feet. It creates a sensation of vertigo. He is painting with the drums, using them for tonal color rather than just meter. Without this specific drum performance, the song would collapse under its own weight. It anchors the surrealism in a visceral physical thud. And here is where we get to the miracle. The song you hear on the radio does not exist. It is a Frankenstein's monster, a corpse sewn together from two incompatible bodies. The Beatles recorded the song twice. The first version, let's call it Take 7, was a stripped-back, dreamy affair. It had the mellotron, the slide guitar, a gentle, stoned vibe. It was beautiful, intimate, and fragile. It was recorded in the key of a major. But Lennon, being the dissatisfied perfectionist he was, went to producer George Martin days later and said it wasn't heavy enough. He didn't mean heavy metal. He meant weighty, substantial, crushing. He wanted brass. He wanted cellos. He wanted the apocalypse. So they went back in and recorded Take 26. This version was a beast. Aggressive trumpets, screaming cellos, a frantic, driving rhythm. The arrangement was dense, cacophonous, and aggressive. Crucially, this version was faster and recorded in the key of B major, likely played in C with the instruments tuned down or using a capo, but sounding in B. Here is the problem that would define the track. Lennon listened to both. He liked the beginning of the first version, Take 7, with its intimacy and the gentle mellotron intro. But he liked the end of the second version, Take 26, with the orchestral storm. He turned to George Martin and said, "Join them together." For any audio engineer in the analog era, this request is a death sentence. It is a physical impossibility. You cannot just splice two takes together if they are in different keys and different tempos. Take 7 was in A, Take 26 was in B. They were mathematically incompatible. If you splice them, the pitch jumps, the rhythm jerks, and the illusion fails. The listener would hear the edit. It would sound like a mistake. But George Martin and his engineer Geoff Emerick utilized the one variable they could control, variable speed, or vari-speed. They realized the physics of the tape machine offered a loophole. If they sped up the first take, Take 7, the pitch would rise from A towards BB. If they slowed down the second take, Take 26, The pitch would fall from B down towards BB. By the grace of the audio gods, or perhaps sheer blind luck, the intersection point where both takes hit a compatible key, roughly B-flat, though slightly detuned, also happened to be the point where their tempos matched. Listen to the track at exactly 60 seconds in. 1 crower. Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to... cut. That is the splice. It happens right around the word going. The timbre of Lennon's voice changes instantly. In the first minute, he sounds younger, lighter, more distinct because the tape is sped up. After the cut, his voice becomes slurred, thick, heavy. This is because the second half of the song is playing significantly slower than it was recorded. This is critical to the song's emotional impact. The formants of his voice, the physical resonance of the throat and chest, are shifted down. This accidental artifact created a drugged vocal sound that psychedelic bands spent the next decade trying to copy with effects units. The Beatles did it with physics. The cellos sound groggy because they are being stretched. The drums sound massive because the decay of the hit is elongated by the slowing of the tape. This creates a sludge in the low end that feels oppressive and heavy. The mistake became the aesthetic. The song literally gets heavier as it goes on, sinking into a molasses of slowed down time. This mimics the lyrical journey from the tree, the observer, down to the ground, the reality. The technology is not just capturing the song, it is telling the story. Let's talk about the Swarman Dal. That harp-like sound you hear bridging the verses, it's an Indian zither that George Harrison had begun to master. It wasn't just a fashion statement. It introduced the concept of microtonal bending and non-Western scales to the Beatles' palette. The Swarmandal provides a descending glissando that acts as a palate cleanser. It wipes the harmonic memory of the listener so they can accept the next weird chord change. It is a texture, not a melody. It adds to the dream logic of the track. It sounds ancient, contrasting with the futuristic tape manipulation. This tension between the ancient Indian strings and the futuristic Verispeed tape creates a timeless vacuum where the song exists. The orchestration itself is George Martin at his absolute peak. He didn't just write a string pad to make it sound pretty. He wrote aggressive, biting lines. The trumpets and horns are playing distinct rhythmic stabs that fight against the rhythm section. This is dissonance used as texture. In the second half of the song, the slowed-down take 26, the arrangement becomes dense, almost claustrophobic. You have backward cymbals sucking the air out of the mix, a sound that has no attack, only a swell, which disorients the brain's temporal processing. You hear the sound before you hear the cause. It reverses cause and effect. This is a subtle psychoacoustic trick that makes the listener feel unmoored, drifting. We must also give credit to Paul McCartney's bass playing. On this track, the bass is not a rhythm instrument. It is a lead instrument. The tone is warm, woolly, and heavily compressed, anchoring the floating elements above it. But look at the lines he plays. He is playing a counter-melody. He weaves in and out of the vocal line, filling the gaps, conversing with Lennon. It is a melodic duet between the voice and the bass. In the context of 1967, this was revolutionary. Bass players were supposed to hold down the root notes. McCartney was painting. His playing in the chorus, specifically the descending run, adds a driving momentum that propels the song forward, even as the tape speed tries to drag it back. And then, the coda, the false ending. The song fades out. The listener relaxes. The journey is over. And then a wall of noise fades back in. This was an act of sonic terrorism. In 1967, the fade-out was a convention to hide the fact that the band didn't know how to end the song. It was a polite way to leave the room. Here, the Beatles used the fade-out as a weapon. The music that returns is pure distinct chaos. It is free jazz. It is avant-garde. You hear wild percussion, the mellotron freaking out on the swing setting, a built-in rhythm loop that sounds manic, and swirling textures of noise. This coda is the sound of the mind completely unraveling. It denies you resolution. It tells you that the strawberry fields are not a peaceful garden, but a place of madness. Lennon mutters something at the end, famously misheard as, "I buried Paul," fueling the Paul is dead conspiracy, but actually, cranberry sauce. The banality of the phrase cranberry sauce juxtaposed with the nightmare soundscape is pure Dadaism. It highlights the absurdity of the entire enterprise. Why is this an instrumentalist's masterpiece when the playing isn't technically flashy in the way a Van Halen solo is? Because it understands that timbre is more important than notes. A virtuoso can play 1,000 notes a minute, but if the tone is sterile, it means nothing. Strawberry Fields Forever is a masterclass in tonal sculpting. Every frequency is carved out. The decision to pan the drums hard, the way the vocals sit deeply in the mix rather than floating on top, it creates an immersive environment. You don't listen to this song, you step inside it. It has a humidity, it has a temperature. Consider the risk involved. This was a pop band. Their fans were teenage girls who wanted She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand. The Beatles handed them a song with no chorus hook, a terrifying orchestral breakdown, inconsistent keys, and lyrics about insanity and existential doubt. It was an act of commercial suicide that turned out to be artistic immortality. They treated their audience with respect. They assumed the listener could handle the complexity. They demanded that the pop song grow up. Furthermore, we must address the guitar work, specifically the slide guitar. George Harrison's contribution here is subtle but vital. He plays a slide line that sounds like a weeping bird. It is not bluesy, it is almost microtonal, mimicking the Indian influence but on a Western instrument. It weaves through the verses, adding a shimmering liquid quality. It reinforces the theme of fluidity, of things slipping through your fingers. The guitar tone is heavily compressed, lacking sharp attack, blending seamlessly with the mellotron. It is difficult to tell where the guitar ends and the keyboard begins. This blurring of lines is central to the song's identity. The production techniques used on Strawberry Fields Forever laid the groundwork for everything that came after. The use of varispeed, backward tapes, heavy compression, and close miking of acoustic instruments became the vocabulary of modern recording. But in 1967, there was no manual. They were inventing the language as they spoke it. Jeff Emmerich was breaking the rules of EMI, risking his job to get the microphone closer to the violin strings than was technically allowed, to capture the grit of the bow. They were abusing the equipment to get a visceral reaction. When you listen to the song today, you are hearing the sound of analog tape being pushed to its breaking point. You can hear the hiss. You can hear the saturation. This is not a flaw. It is the soul of the recording. Digital recording is a grid. It is perfect, clean, and often sterile. Strawberry Fields Forever is an organism. It breathes. The tape speed manipulation means that the timing is never perfectly on the grid. It pushes and pulls. It has a human pulse even in its most mechanical moments. The Strawberry Fields of the title is a paradox. It is a real place, yes, but in the song, it is a state of non-existence. Nothing is real. This is the key line. The music serves this lyric. If nothing is real, then the music shouldn't be real either. It shouldn't sound like a band in a room. It should sound like a dream. The genius of the Beatles was realizing that the recording studio was the only place where they could construct a reality that was more potent than the one outside. They built a cathedral of sound to house a nervous breakdown. We must also reflect on the cultural impact. This song was released as a double A-side with Penny Lane. Penny Lane is the perfect counterpoint. Bright, crisp, observant, external, and hyper-realistic. Strawberry Fields is dark, murky, introspective, internal, and surreal. Together, they represent the two hemispheres of the human brain, or perhaps the two sides of Liverpool. But Strawberry Fields is the one that points to the future. Penny Lane perfected the past. Strawberry Fields invented the future. It opened the door for Pink Floyd, for Led Zeppelin, for Radiohead, for Tame Impala. It legitimized the idea that rock music could be high art, that it could deal with the darkest corners of the human psyche without losing its melodic power. The song is a loop. It ends with a fade out and a fade in, suggesting that the madness never really stops. It just recedes for a moment. It traps the listener. Even the structure is circular. It doesn't have a traditional bridge. It just cycles through verses and choruses, drilling deeper and deeper into the same harmonic obsession. It is relentless. In the end, what makes Strawberry Fields Forever a masterpiece is its bravery. It is the sound of four men standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into the void of their own fame and their own minds, and deciding to jump. They didn't know if the parachute would open. They didn't know if the tape splice would hold. They didn't know if the audience would follow them, but they jumped anyway, and in doing so they dragged the rest of the world down with them, into the beautiful, terrifying, multicolored darkness. So, the next time you hear that flute intro, do not just hum along. Listen to the mechanics. Listen to the struggle. Listen to the sound of a band destroying itself to create something eternal. Listen to the sound of the razor blade cutting the tape, severing the past from the future. That is the sound of a masterpiece. It is the sound of the impossible becoming inevitable. It is the sound of Strawberry Fields, and it is, indeed, forever.